Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you cordially on today's working breakfast. The topic of the breakfast is UberEconomy, a shared future. I would like to introduce our guest speakers. Let me start with Mateusz Litewski, who is the Public Policy Manager of Central and Eastern Europe for Uber, sitting in Poland.
Hi.
Good morning. Ondřej Malý. Ondřej is the Digital Agenda Coordinator in the Office of the Government of the Czech Republic.
Hi.
Good morning. Aleš Chmelař. Aleš is Financial Analyst in the Office of the Government of the Czech Republic. Aleš Michal. You know him as economist, and he is co-owner of the investment fund Quant. And you know Jan Klesla from Lidové noviny, who is the deputy head of the economic section. My name is Pavel Kysilka. I am founder and chairman of the board of the 6D Academy, an institution supporting the Czech businesses to transform themselves for the digital age. Today's breakfast is organized by Institut pro politiku a společnost, Institute for Politics and Society. We are as well very glad that the breakfast is a part of the Week of Innovation, Týden inovací, organized by ELI. And as well, we are happy that the co-organizer of today's breakfast is the Liberal Forum, European Liberal Forum. The topic of the breakfast, as I said, is the shared economy, but we join to the name of the morning as well the Uber economy. You know that Uber is more than Uber. I remember my first journey 6 years ago to Silicon Valley, and that was the big financial conference. The first sentence I heard from everybody was, "Uberize your business." And we tried here, frankly speaking. So Uberization in the meantime became a phenomenon. But you know that the shared economy is really a big phenomenon that has several big aspects. It's a business phenomenon, it's an economic phenomenon, it's a social phenomenon, and definitely legal, political, and big regulation phenomenon. That's exactly the reason why this topic became a subject of today's meeting. So allow me now to ask Mateusz for his speech and for his contribution to the first round of the discussion. Then we'll open the open discussion, the forum for you. And at the end of the whole day, I will ask Honza to try to wrap up the discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I have the pleasure of representing Uber and managing our kind of external relations within the Central Eastern Europe region. I've been with the company for just under 3 years now, and it sometimes seems like a lifetime. We've seen our business globally grow from a small idea in the heads of 2 of our founders into well, our own word and our own adjective these days, as you've said, Uberized economy. So I wanted to kind of use my introduction to kind of go back to how it all started. So, as most ideas that take hold start, it started with a small idea out of necessity. So Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, our 2 founders, were they were entrepreneurs, they were investors, they were innovation people from San Francisco. They traveled to Paris for a digital conference called Le Web. And as anybody who's ever been to Paris might confirm, finding a taxi at night is not always easy. It's easier in some areas of the city. It's not that easy in other areas. So basically, they came out in the cold, and they were like pretty frustrated trying to get a taxi. So they thought, well, why can't I just click on my phone and have a car come using the smartphone technology that we have, using GPS, using all these new tools that we have at our disposal. And basically, they took that idea, they flew it back to the States, and they started Uber. At the very beginning, it was just a small service connecting riders with licensed black cars, so town cars in the States. And it essentially started as a small service for a group of friends. And once the founders noticed how popular and how well functioning this could be, it began to grow. It began to attract investment. It began expansion across the United States, and then gradually internationally into a company now that's present in almost 80 countries worldwide. We're present on every continent, and we facilitate millions of trips every day through our platform. However, the kind of the turning point, I think, was that when we came to Europe and we started hiring local people, local new staff basically began troubleshooting and stress testing our platform, and we've identified that while the premium service of luxury cars is a market, we learned that with technology, with efficiency, people basically want to get around cities easily, quickly, and not at a premium price. And at this stage, we launched a product called Uber Pop or UberX, depending on where you go, which dramatically challenged our whole business. And within a few short months, we noticed that the Uber Black, Uber Lux service that was running previously became the niche product, and actually our majority of our business grew on the budget product, just because we were giving people the ability to move around cities at the tap of a button, cashlessly and very seamlessly. And I think I'm going to close my opening statements by just saying that the lesson we learned, and I think this is part of the phenomenon that you mentioned, is that innovation is not a starting and an end process. You need to continuously innovate, and you need to continuously disrupt your business, because if we're living in very dynamic times where technology and competition are increasing their pace, and if we wouldn't have changed our business back in 2011, I think, or 12, somebody else would have come and did it better, and we would be the ones catching up rather than we would be the ones setting the trend. And I think we continuously do that, and I think this is part of what makes Uber so successful. The ownership of the local teams and of the local staff on the business, on the way it functions, on what products we use, we launch, whether it's budget, whether it's premium, whether it's food delivery or courier delivery, or now freight and cargo in the States. I think we continuously challenge our business, and we continuously try to evolve it to be one step ahead. And I think this is the lesson we've learned, and we've seen that this is the lesson that our competitors are learning, and this is more and more true across all the different markets. Even traditional industries like banking is looking at the fintech sector now and trying to foresee what could be the trend 2-3 years from now. The hotel industry is looking at Airbnb and trying to find ways how to tailor their product to the new consumer and the new consumer's expectations of the services he wants to use. And I think this is something that's going to be driving at least the technology part, but in turn all the traditional parts over the next years.
Mateusz, thank you very much for your opening speech. I'm looking forward to the discussion. What's extremely interesting and maybe be a part of the discussion then, is that Uberization or shared models in the economy belong to the disruptive trends in our life and business. And what's for me, in my eyes, extremely interesting is that Uber is working on disruption of itself. Yeah. So you will Uberize or disrupt your own business, which is seen in Pittsburgh, for instance, in autonomous fleet of cars, is something that maybe shows how your future business model could look like. So again, thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Ondřej Malý to deliver his remarks and speech.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, and I thank you for having me here and for having the opportunity to speak here. Good morning to everyone. I'm Ondřej Malý from the Office of the Government. Well, the sharing economy is something that's it's one of my priorities at the Office of the Government right now, because it's very important to have some sort of a good regulation of the new business models. And by regulation, I don't mean regulation per se, but have some sort of legal framework that will encompass the new business models, that will solve the issues that we might have right now. Because the platforms such as Uber or Airbnb, they have their own opportunities and challenges. These are the opportunity is that supply and demand are met fast and more efficient, and the unused assets are well, efficiently equipped to the benefit of the general economy. And obviously, that's what I like most. That the old business models are challenged and disrupted, and the old ways of doing business are challenged, which is always good, and it's always good for the consumer and for the economy. But obviously, they have their own challenges. It's mainly the regulation issue, obviously, because the state is usually the last to react to the disruption, and also in terms of labor relation, it's very important to solve issues such as healthcare, insurance, and social insurance. How to solve, for example, wages that are not rising fast enough in terms of gig economy and so on. So that's what we need to do. We have my colleague Aleš Miláš is now preparing a study, an economic study of the sharing economy of the platforms that we have to deliver until the end of June to the government, and then perhaps the government will decide what to do with the platforms and with the new business models that the platforms are bringing. Because now, for example, in terms of Uber and automotive, now there's a novelization of the law, and all the lobbies are bringing their own things to the table, which is not very good for the law itself, and it might be very difficult to work in this environment where everything is changed always. So we want to bring some sort of comprehensive solution to the table, and I'm looking forward to what Aleš Miláš has to offer, and what he is going to bring there. So thank you very much again, and with this I pass the mic to you.
Thank you very much, Ondřej. Definitely, new phenomenon always needs a while to be well understood and considered whether it is or is not a subject for any specific regulation or not. So again, I'm very much looking forward to the discussion, because it's, you know, that there is a lot of controversy in topics related to it. So, which is a natural bridge to our next speaker, who is Aleš Malý. I would like to ask you.
Thank you very much. Does it work? I think it's on. Hello? Yes, I get to the top.
Thank you. Me and technology, you know. So, now to start with, actually, thank you very much for inviting us, as the Office of the Government has two representatives here today. And I think it is important to underline what Ondřej has already said. We have this crucial task to coordinate the activities that somehow concern the regulatory framework for the sharing economy. We have established a task force on the sharing economy, which deals basically with the regulatory issue on the basis of a large discussion for the time being, but we will present some thesis and some tasks for the individual government institutions and ministries to actually create something comparable to a non-paper or white paper at the end of this year, so that we can effectively and systematically arrange a legal framework for this new phenomenon. So as Ondřej said, what is important is to realize that sharing economy is bringing completely new perspective in linking demand and supply much more quickly, much more efficiently. In a way, it can create something as a perfect market within some limits, but almost a perfect market, which is a great opportunity to render more efficient the services that users are usually accustomed to. In a way, it is also an opportunity to look on the traditional businesses, not just in a way to disrupt them simply, but also look on their regulatory framework and say whether their regulation is necessary or commensurate to the tasks that we have and to the task of delivering services to consumers. And it's not just a case of Uber, it is a case of basically every single online platform that brings a challenge to traditional businesses. And in terms of our thinking, what we encountered first was quite a simple task. We thought it was a difficult one, but was basically one of supporting sharing economy in what, for example, Airbnb calls genuine home sharing or genuine sharing, which is this part of economy where you have quite low intensity of work. You have people that actually use it as a complement to other kinds of work. And there, I think that we can have some tangible progress in setting a threshold under which both regulatory and tax requirements will be lowered. Of course, this remains to be discussed within all the ministries and all the interests in a way. But this is something that would be a rather simple task. If you share your room, if you share your home for summer, if you actually use your car to carpool, I think there's no reason, even within the current framework, the current legal framework, actually to make you a subject to the same regulatory requirements that traditional businesses. And this is a very crucial part, because what we see in the genuine sharing is a real opportunity to use the underused or underutilized assets and actually create new value and give it in a way to the market. We do think that the current legal framework actually in this way is quite open to interpretation, and maybe with some almost cosmetical changes, it could arrange this kind of businesses and this kind of part of this sharing economy segment quite well. And this is a great opportunity actually to also show that we can have a progressive and systematic approach to this regulation. Nevertheless, as you probably know, this segment of sharing economy is not the whole segment of the economy, and the opportunity that it brings are much larger and much wider, and I would say even more ambitious. Therefore, what we have to do in other aspects is to focus on a coherent regulatory framework that would not overburden both the existing and the new platforms, and that will bring an added value in a way. In this approach, I think it is important to stress two aspects. The first one is technological neutrality. I know that this is something that needs a definition, but in a way what we want is not to discriminate any player in the market, whether it is online based or whether it is offline based, and create in a way a level playing field. And I know it is a cliche, but it is very important for the new businesses to strive, and at the same time for the market to in a way find its equilibrium without any fluctuations. So this is a level playing field, and technological neutrality is probably one of the principles that we will have to follow. to ensure that if you're offline, you don't have some specific advantages, and the same would apply if you're online. That indeed there is a competition that is a healthy one, and that would bring added value to consumers. The another aspect is of external costs of competition, because we see that the competition is very fierce at the moment in the market, where sharing economy is showing its greatest assets, and we will have to look on the aspects of fair competition and of not creating undue external costs or externalities to the economy, to the state, or to the engaged partners. I mean, it is a general principle. I would be happy to discuss it in detail, but in general, we have to avoid that this creating a new framework will not create losers, like permanent losers that would not have access to the fair access to the competition. Other aspects that we will have to follow in a way is also the labor market preparedness and labor market rules preparedness for this type of economy. I think it is in the interest of the state, if it is to increase employment, to actually engage constructively with the new platforms. It is an opportunity for a large segment of the labor market that we sometimes tend to oversimplify as those that are somehow marginalized on the market, but it is not the case, and it is increasingly not the case. And the conditions that would actually create, again, a level playing field in terms of other providers of work would be also something that we're looking at. In a way, what we have to ensure is that the labor force in the platform economy is stable, that in a way it fulfills requirements that are necessary for a healthy working of the society and of the labor market. And I think it is also crucial for the platforms to develop. As I haven't maybe mentioned at the beginning, our continental legal system is slightly different from the common law one. And in a way it requires clear rules so all the players can follow them, so that there's no uncertainty in terms of providing business, and therefore no loss of business models, or no loss of opportunities. In a way, you need some kind of legal framework to develop your business in the continental legal system. And we do think that it is in the interest of the new platforms, as well as other parts or other actors of the economy. So this is just in very general terms. I do think that the discussion will open more of the principles that we talked about. We would be actually very happy to create a system that works for everybody in this segment of the economy, that actually is creating an impetus to new technologies, so that they could be used efficiently, and so that they are not discriminated vis-a-vis the offline sector, if you will. So let's maybe have a broader discussion, but at the same time, what we need to know is that the Czech Government Office is a mere coordinator in this aspect, and that many responsibilities actually, especially in the vertical regulation, are still at the individual ministries, and we are here actually to facilitate the debate. This is also why we are here, but we are not, or we couldn't be the ones who will dictate the general legal framework, especially in the vertical regulation. In horizontal one, we can have the suggestions and maybe influence it, but it will be up to the broader government institutions actually to set a system. Hopefully fast enough for the platforms to make it functional, and hopefully also in a systematic way, so that we can avoid the very sad or very unhappy decisions of legal authorities that we have seen in the past, basically all over the world, so that there is really a systematic approach and not one based on ad hoc decisions that are actually detrimental both to the new platforms but also to the overall working of the legal system. Well, thank you for the time being.
Archie, thank you very much. We have just listened to the two speakers representing more the regulatory and policies framework and viewpoints. As I said, sharing economy is extremely strong business and economic phenomenon. So I'm very happy that we have other people here whom you know for long years as excellent analysts on the business and economic side.
Thank you, Pavel. I've got only 2 remarks. Good morning. First, government cannot drive this process. Cannot drive. So I think the government cannot understand everything. So government can be a problem for the future of this UberEconomy. So that's one remark. The market can drive this business. For the betting market in the Czech Republic, I think we need willingness to risk, because we are very conservative in the Czech Republic and in the Europe right now. So if you go bankrupt, so you are a loser. In the US, it's a good opportunity to start something new. So I would like to stress willingness to risk, and we need something like the success stories in the Czech Republic. Something like the ICQ in Israel, or some big exit, some big success at the front page of each newspapers, telling to young guys that it's possible to have good company, to sell it, to be a billionaire, and this could improve our willingness to risk, to start a business. So those 2 remarks. Government cannot drive, and willingness to risk as a priority number 1. Thank you.
So it was very brief. Thank you very much, Aleši. And we have Jan Klesla. You know that Jan Klesla has excellent legal background, but you know as well that his focus in a couple of last years are new trends in the economy, in business. We can call it digital economy or digital revolution or exponential era. So Honzo.
Thank you, Pavel, and good morning, everyone. I have just three short remarks. Relating to our paper. You can find it even in print, and keep it. The first one is that we suffer for a terrible lack of data. We do not know what the sharing economy looks like. We don't know the statistics. We don't know almost anything right now, and we still want to regulate it. The problem is, as the guys from government usually say, that the platforms are not willing to share the data. And I went to almost all the papers and articles published in Czech Republic before, and I can say that those are predominantly based on ideology, on PR, and so on. So I think we need to know what we are talking about first, and I have sincere hope that you guys from the government will change it very soon. My second point is that we really need to differentiate between the real or genuine sharing, like the carpooling, and something we can call just the maybe evolution of business models. So on the one hand, we have this carpooling of guys commuting to work. This could be great for our traffic problems and so on. On the other hand, and we do not have, for instance, Uberpool in Czech Republic yet. On the other hand, we have this business on the platforms. A colleague of mine just described just recently the case of Ukrainians and Slovaks working like 15 hours a day for a ride close to the minimum wage. I'm sorry, I can't see any sharing economy and benefits of sharing economy here. It's just the evolution of taxi service. And it's a usual business model, but I don't think we should use the same view and the same regulation for the genuine sharing and for this business models. Somewhere between is something we can call the gig work or melouchy in Czech, and it's it's not anything real new, but it's quite hard to find and to draw a line between these models. In my view, it's the pricing mechanism. I believe that the one who is setting the price is the provider. It's not just the middleman. You cannot say I'm just the middleman and I'm not responsible if you are setting the price. So that brings me to my third point, and that's the protection of the competition, as Aleš mentioned. And well, we can even talk about the competition law. I'm not really surprised that we can hear complete silence from our antitrust authority. Well, they are usually like dealing with cases 10 or more years old. So I don't think our ex-post regulator will deal with that, and we will have to find a solution in the ex-ante regulation. So those are just three short remarks, and I'm really looking forward to discussion. Thank you.
Alfonso, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we just are ending the first phase of our working breakfast, and now let me invite you to the discussion. So, looking forward for your questions and remarks, and we are ready here around the table to provide feedback for them. So, please.
I will speak without. My name is Michal Skořepa. I'm working at Česká spořitelna as a macroeconomic analyst, and given that I focus on the macroeconomics, I was slightly missing today in the debate until now the macroeconomic impact of this whole area. And more specifically, I'm wondering about the extent to which sharing economy can actually hurt growth, just like robotization or automation, where the demand may rise a little bit as a result of introduction of these sharing mechanisms, but at the same time, the supply which will be able to cover this demand may be lower, because if you share, for example, if you share a car, you need less cars to serve the same purposes or the same demand. So I was wondering whether any member of the panel has a view on this, or whether there are any studies which give some first estimates of this possible effect, or whether you agree, you don't agree, it will be pro-growth or against growth. Any comments on the macro side of the whole issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mateusz, how are you going?
Thank you very much for the question. So I'll take it in parts. So with regards to the macroeconomy, and I think I'll focus on the Central and Eastern Europe region here in my answer to you. So, you know, the history of the 20th century meant that Central Eastern Europe countries have had a bit of a late start to a lot of the growth dimension that Western Europe enjoyed over 50 years after the war. And so we've essentially had to catch up very quickly. And Poland, Czech Republic, these countries have been, you know, success stories in this shock therapy, where we quickly tried to convert our economy and try to catch up as quickly as possible. And obviously this came at a price where we've sold a lot of the kind of state-owned enterprises to foreign investors in exchange for quick foreign direct investments to try to boost and stimulate the growth and catch up. And what this has meant is that there is a huge, you know, income gap between, if you take Germany and anywhere east of Germany. And I think, and if we would continue growing at the current pace, like the gap is closing very, very shortly, like slowly. I think part of this is just the way the traditional industries, manufacturing, production has kind of been outsourced or has been made more efficient or has just decreased because just the way the economy works. So I think the question here, and I've seen this asked, and I'll refer to Poland just because I'm from there, that the Polish Ministry of Development, which has been now formed as a combination of the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Regional Development to oversee all of the economic policy, has identified that the middle income trap is one of the biggest kind of threats to the macroeconomic kind of development and sustainability of the economy. And given the fact that there's less and less traditional industry places where you can go and get a job and work, the 5 days, and the pay rise is slow. Like we have to try to find ways to boost people's incomes based with what we have, and what we've seen in many places is that sharing economy, collaborative economy, or just new platforms and business models help facilitate this, right? If you have an average job and you finish your work at 4 p.m. and it's not enough, to make ends meet, like you can either try to find another job, but your other job's hardly going to be double or triple what you're making now, or you can basically use one of these platforms to plug in and to make additional funds. And we've seen, and I think this is true especially for the Czech Republic, like the vast majority of the partner drivers that we have here have apart from Uber, another source of income. Because like if, say you work at the post office, you finish at 3 p.m., why not connect for 3 hours, drive, make a few trips, earn additional income, and then go back to your family and make that work around you. And I think, you mentioned some challenges for the economy, but I think enabling people to find good ways of plugging into an efficient market that connects demand and supply, and to generate additional transparent and kind of measurable income. I think this is something that the new platforms are bringing as potential for the macroeconomic situation.
Thank you very much. Anybody else around the table?
Just okay. So just very shortly, we're looking also at the macroeconomic picture in two aspects. The one is a multiplier. We have a simple model that could actually show us what is the effect on other sectors, actually, especially of a decreased, supply of cars to some extent. But what we see is that we haven't actually confirmed it. Yes, exactly in the case of the Czech Republic, we haven't really seen a confirmation of the hypothesis that it would decrease a purchase of cars yet. Actually, the extent is really so low, and the usage of Uber services is actually competing with other aspects than actually having its own car. That might be different in other economies. It might be different in the US, for example. But for the time being, we don't see that actually in Prague specifically. We see actually more competition with the public transport and with traditional businesses in this aspect, for the time being. But we also are in a terrible lack of data, something that we can discuss further afterwards. So therefore, we're looking at this question, and the other one is a more theoretical conclusion of what you said, is that most probably a value will not be lost in principle. What we see, they might be redistributed differently, and it might increase aggregate saving in the economy, which depends on the overall macroeconomic stance or framework, whether it's a good or bad thing. At the very moment, it might be a bad thing because we have too much savings, we have a really low interest rate, but this is something that has to be taken contextually. But we're looking on those aspects too, and we're looking more on the comparison of actually what could be the effect on other types of transport, in terms of maybe crowding it a little bit out actually. But in the Czech case, it's very different from other aspects that we see or other worries that, for example, the automotive industry has in this aspect, for the time being again.
Maybe I'll just add, I think the automotive industry is also foreseeing these trends, and we've seen a large number of investments in joint projects and cooperations between Daimler and Uber, General Motors and Lyft, Toyota, Volvo. All these companies are anticipating that there's going to be some kind of shift in the way people buy and use cars, and these companies are also trying to stay one step ahead and to be prepared for this. So I think, but on the other side is, we're seeing this obviously in the States, but more and more in Europe as well, the shift from ownership to usage, right, of young consumers. And I saw data that about 10% of millennials in the US have already kind of given up their car or given up on trying to buy a car. And I mean, this is the country of Henry Ford, where every 16-year-old took his first money to buy that car, to have that sense of emancipation from his parents and the freedom. And now we see more and more that, young people see the car and the purchase of a car and the insurance and the parking and everything as not giving them that freedom, and now not owning the car, but living in a city where you can tap a button and get a ride in 3 minutes and do it cheaply and efficiently, gives them that sense of freedom. And we've seen the numbers of applicants in the States, maybe not in Europe yet, but in the States for driving licenses start decreasing, and just because people don't need to do that. And I think like when my kids grow up, and I very seriously doubt that their instinct is going to be, let's go and get a driver's license, because I think mobility within cities, combination of public transport, Uber-like platforms, the car rental sharing for where you park your scooter and click on the app, you drive it, leave it, somebody else picks it up. I think these services will grow more and more to kind of help us drive private car usage out of the city centers at least.
Thank you, Mateusz.
So the question was about the macroeconomy, Michal. Great business or case studies, Silicon Valley, definitely, California. So GDP growth year on year, first quarter. In California it was 2.1, average US 1.5. So GDP is growing faster than the rest of the country. But what's interesting is the rate of unemployment. The rate of unemployment in California 4.9, but in the US 4.5. So the rate of unemployment is higher, but GDP growth is faster. That's interesting to discuss.
Thank you very much. Two general remarks. First, better sharing economy generally. Better utilization of things is always positive for the general macroeconomic development. It is clear, because you better utilize things and you can reallocate the resources to better purposes. And second remark, which is not quantified but really is real, is that Airbnb, Uber and other models are not only eating the existing cake of the specific market, they are enlarging the market, meaning it's not zero game model. Airbnb is definitely eating the business of traditional hotels, but as well increasing the overall cake. People who would never buy a hotel are utilizing Airbnb from the side of users and the providers as well. And the same is valid for the taxi drivers. People working for Uber, some of them would never work for taxi service, and some young people who would never call a taxi are happy with today with Uber and its competitors. Františku.
Good morning, my name is František Dostálek, ex-KPMG. We've heard a lot about the macroeconomic impact and also about the regulation, from the two guys. My impression is that what they try to regulate, probably not only here in the Czech Republic, but everywhere in Europe, is just to preserve the current situation. You were speaking about a labor market, competition, but 5 years down the road, the situation will be very different. And I think that from my perspective as user of these services, there are 4 factors probably which are important to me, maybe to everybody, which is price, simplicity, reliability, and safety. And if these 4 factors are here, I will choose the best service from the perspective of these 4 important things to me. So my question is, how do regulators, not only in the Czech Republic but maybe elsewhere in Europe, try to deal with these, let's say, individual expectations of consumers, and on the other hand, to play the regulatory role which in my view, is extremely difficult because the world and the market are changing so quickly.
Well, yes, it's wonderful for the consumer if the price goes down, obviously, but it's not so good when the price means that the driver is working under his living costs. So if you are replaced by the analyst from Ethiopia, for example, who works for $2 per hour, then you will also be very unhappy because you're not very much able to continue in your job. So I think that's one problem that we have to solve, is that the people in Europe are used to some sort of living standards that are higher than anywhere in the world, perhaps, and they want to preserve those living standards. And sometimes the gig economy is it's driving prices down, it's driving wages down, and that's, I think, one of the things that we will have to solve in the future, most definitely. So because for example, in terms of Uber, sometimes I drive Uber, or I use Uber, and I went with two kinds of drivers. One was named Galina, and she was Ukrainian, and she was part of a company that employs hundreds of Galinas and Alexanders. And
maybe I know her.
Maybe yes. Well, that's what she told me, and that's what the invoice said. And that's one problem, because they probably work for minimum wage or something slightly more, and it's not a great thing, most definitely. And the other one was named Martin, and he was driving because he likes to drive, and because he's having some extra money by driving for Uber in the evenings. He's making quite a good money, but he wants to clear his head, and he used to do it by driving a car alone. Now he does it by driving a car for Uber. So these are two very different business models that Uber has, and I think it's also a challenge for the regulator to discern among them, among different business models that the platform economy actually brings.
Anybody else? Honzo?
Just this one short remark that the economists already know something called competition for monopoly, and in the online and generally in this area, it's quite efficient to have a monopoly, and we already know that this competition of 2 or 3 platforms or big companies for the monopoly is to benefit for the customers, basically with the low prices, like such a benefit. Well, then we have to ensure that the winner will enjoy the monopoly for some time. Well, just to motivate the guys, the competitors to compete. But then there is this problem of the new competition for monopoly, and basically we have to ensure that there will be the free competition afterwards, and that this competition is, as the Google always said, well, just one click away. So we need to ensure that even the Czech platforms, the Czech companies, can compete with these big guys, and I believe that this competition is the best and probably the only way to ensure that the drivers will get, I think, fair reward, that we will have the benefits from the gig economy, as Paolo mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I could just say, I think competition's obviously the key word here, and we've been as Uber, the subject of kind of studies and investigations by competition authorities and consumer protection agencies all around Europe, and these offices who traditionally deal with concentration, with mergers and acquisitions, with consumer rights, are in a huge majority incredibly supportive, because they find that exactly that the consumer, like if we think that the end end result of regulation should be to make sure that the consumer gets, you know, the product that he wants for a fair price, and it's safe and it's reliable. Like you said, these are the four things. So if regulation is created focusing on the consumer, then obviously then everything's fine, right? Then the, you know, competition and competitive pressure changes the dynamics of industries, and at least in the kind of city transportation industry that's been kind of stale with regards to competition and innovation and fighting for that consumer. Like we've seen, you know, we've seen that all around Europe, that as soon as like Uber starts entering the market or starts growing, like the traditional players start to develop apps to improve their tracking, to start advertising, making consumer promotions, discounts, whatever, because they finally have the impetus to compete. And I think if regulation is created with the task of making sure that the services the consumer gets are fair, that he has at his disposal the way to you know, get his rights, get a refund, or submit negative feedback or whatever, then I think the new platforms offer a new avenue, and it's the question then becomes, how far is regulation supposed to protect the incumbent versus how much is regulation supposed to protect the consumer? And this is, I think, the traditional trade-off where a lot of the friction comes in. Regarding the question with the Alexanders and the Olgas and whatnot, I think we've seen in the Czech Republic over the past, in 2016, 70% growth of partner drivers. And like, you know, where nobody's chained to a car or to a wheel, and you know, the reason why a lot of people join the platforms is because the entry and exit criteria are so simple. If somebody tries it out, and what we've seen in a huge majority of cases, and we actually encourage this, is that people joining these companies, you know, these are tradition, like to a large extent, a gateway for these people, because if to become an Uber driver, you have to set up your business and everything. Some people may want to, you know, hire themselves in a company like this, try it out for 2 months, see how it works, see if there's any, like, if the money that, you know, the PR and the marketing and the articles and the studies say checks out, and if it checks out, we give full support to the drivers, you know, how to set up your business, you know, how to do it efficiently, how to set up your accounting and everything, you know, and I think it's basically, we look at these you know, side companies that have created themselves around in our environment as a basically funnel into individual entrepreneurship, and this is a trend. But obviously, you know, we continue, like we've grown as a company within 6-7 years. I think our pace of growth has outpaced Google and Facebook at our age, and obviously, if we went back in time, you know, several things we'd probably do a bit differently. Maybe we would upset a few governments a little bit less if we were a little bit more gracious and kind of. But again, you know, our growth has outpaced the personnel growth, the structures and everything. We're trying to catch up now, and we think that, you know, we want to be regulated. We're too big of a business globally to exist in a legal vacuum, and we see more and more governments moving in this direction. And I think the interesting study is the European Commission's guidelines on the collaborative economy that were published last year, which basically said that, you know, any restrictive regulation that you put in will be outdated the moment it goes live, because the technology changes so quickly. So we fully support a kind of broad approach to different to group the platforms and to set the parameters for the platforms to, you know, flexibly enter into these. Otherwise, you know, you regulate something, but in 3 months that something will already be something else, you know.
And can I give you advice?
Always.
This will be only business advice. I like Uber. Yeah, I know Travis. I was many times in Silicon Valley. Start with the answer for the question, how much taxes did you pay in the Czech Republic for the last year? Start with this. What is the answer? Yeah? How much taxes did you pay here? Time space, 0. Let's, I think, start with paying taxes here, moving some regional headquarters here to Czech Republic, and you will see that there will be changes in regulations and everything. That's the advice.
Thanks for that. We've actually, we have a local entity, we have a local business, we have local employees, and we pay local taxes, and so do the drivers. They pay local taxes. Regarding the service.
Sorry. So you are saying that Uber paid taxes last year in Czech Republic?
I'm fairly confident that we have, yeah. We have a local, no, trust me, we have a local business here. Local business pays tax, of course.
From revenue? From the whole turnover? From the whole turnover?
No, so the driver turnover is taxed here, and then our service fee, we pay that at the country where we are registered. As a service provider, we pay to, where it's applicable.
And how do you ensure that the drivers all really pay the taxes?
Well, I mean, it's what we can only do so much because these are not our employees. We cannot remit and pay for them. What we can do is we make sure that the transparency of the payments on the platform is clear enough that it gives the people the tools to pay their taxes. And obviously, if somebody's not paying their taxes on on driving people around, then they get fined, and obviously we don't support it.
Well, just one example. In Estonia, for instance, Uber's got this deal with the government, and I think this is what Aleš meant. I mean, Uber is providing the data to the government, and the drivers can opt in to the tax scheme, where the Uber itself is deducing 15%, like that, and paying taxes on their behalf. And this is clear, transparent deal, and I think that we all can just make this deal with our government, with our officials, with our politicians, and then we can talk about the regulation and about the deregulating. Well, one personal remark: I'm really like a libertarian person, but I cannot have Ondřej, I am. But I cannot argue against not paying taxes. This is about the social responsibility. This is about the responsibility to the country and to the market where you earn your money. So, well, the first CSR thing you can do is to pay taxes.
I think that this is a discussion we're having in parallel in many different countries, and there's several different models how this works. Some countries decided to introduce, for example, a per trip premium that basically constitutes like a flat rate of tax, like a small amount per trip rendered. We see in other markets like Estonia the opt-in system for tax declarations, and then we see countries like Portugal, for example, or now Poland is developing the system where cashless and paperless transactions are more and more promoted, just because they fight the tax flight and in the cash-based system. So. Take Poland, for example, and because I was at a discussion with the Ministry of Finance about this several weeks ago. The Polish authorities want to introduce something called the Central Cash Register. It will be a government-held aggregator for all the cashless transactions to go through it, and for consumers to be able to download the electronic receipt or the electronic invoice. And I'm aware that there is something similar here. And in Poland, we have the discussion of whether the in-car cash register serves its purpose in the 21st century, and this was touched upon a little bit earlier when we were just saying whether the existing regulations are tailored for 2016, 2017 and onwards. And if every single zloty or euro or Czech crown goes through our system, then it's recorded and it doesn't disappear. So if we can basically find technological synergies between our platform, which has an open API, and government resources, to basically reduce the burden on the passenger, so on the driver. So if we can say that every single transaction goes through a government-held system, that eliminates the requirement for the in-car cash register, which costs money and it's just inefficient. Then we can do that. And you know, this goes back to what I was saying. As a dynamic company that was growing too fast for its own good, I think now is the time when we kind of take stock and we try to find the avenues to do this. And you know, I'm sure we're going to have similar discussions in the Czech Republic with the Ministry of Finance here about how can we, you know, provide the government with enough clarity and enough visibility into what happens, you know, on the financial side of the platform and on the part of the drivers, to make sure that the taxes are paid, and to make sure that we can remove the cost burdens and the bureaucratic burdens on the you know, service providers, you know, in exchange for this. I think it's a you know, it's a two-sided conversation.
Thank you very much. The next question, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hannah Gavasova. I'm from Square Bed and Bob's. I'm a lawyer, so please don't hold that against me. I have a taxi service unrelated question. One of you gentlemen have said that what we need here for the Czech Republic, for the economy to thrive, are success stories published on front pages of newspapers. And while I couldn't agree more with that, we already have some success stories. Have you noticed that the prevailing tone of the questions that are asked of people are, so what went wrong? So what's your worst experience with this and that? So do people envy you a lot? So do your neighbors hate you because you have a new car? So you went to this market, this and that, and it failed completely. So describe that experience. Now, while I don't think that an interview should be a walk in the park, I think that what we need, possibly deserve, is a more balanced description of the story. And I keep wondering, why are we doing this to ourselves? I mean, do we like hitting ourselves over the head with a brick? Do we like failed stories? Is it what we do? Do other nations do that too? Because I think that all of you know that attitude it makes a lot, pretty much everything. So what's your opinion of that? Does a success story does it need to be a positive one? What if the success story is a negative one? What if it's covered in a way which, you know, makes your hair stand up on your head? Thank you.
That was me who mentioned it. I totally agree. And positive one, front page, each newspaper.
Well, I can just add that the sharing economy is not just Uber, it's a little bit a symbol. Here we can mention, for instance, local Czech guys like Litewski or others. There's a lot of startups, going. Well, I think they are trying to provide basically what we call the jig work, and it's quite efficient. And those are like marketplaces for small, or maybe even like SMEs, but usually for small guys trying to provide something, and they are on the brink of being the genuine sharing. And well, I think there's a lot of success stories. The problem is that there's always some kind of symbol here, and now we are talking predominantly about the taxi industry, then about the real estate bubble, and then well, there's the rest. And of course, it's a little bit of pragocentrism here, because you know, we are all living in the big city, and well, sometimes it's quite cool to look outside of Prague or Brno, and well, we can see that there's a lot of so-called sharing, even in small communities, without any platforms, unfortunately. But I think there's a huge opportunity for any platform. We have seen that the local newspapers are not quite a good idea, not quite successful, but I can imagine that there could be a great opportunity for instance, for the carpooling. I mean, we talked to guys from BlaBlaCar, but we are just too small for them Well, I can imagine just something like a local BlaBlaCar. It's not just it's not just Prague with having this terrible traffic problems. Not just the Nohorská Street. It's almost everywhere. So we can build something like that.
Just very shortly, actually, we talk about success stories, but what I think we lack. I'm happy that we switch debate to this, but I think what we lack is actually failure stories that are success, which we don't see actually. What people are afraid in the Czech Republic is not to have a success, but of failing. And showing that failing is not actually dying out somewhere in a corner is actually the key to changing the mind, I think. Not putting more success stories to the front pages, I think there is enough of them. Maybe this could be an aspect, but maybe focusing more on surviving the failure and starting again, for example, which is not as present as I would prefer, for example.
Yeah, I think this is the crucial difference of why there's the percentage of American startups that have grown globally is a lot higher than that of European, and it's partially is the mentality that we're afraid to fail, but the other part is obviously the availability of venture capital and capital markets that can fuel the growth and basically accelerate it. But then the other side is basically that in the US it's just simpler. If you fail, you go bankrupt, you write it off and you start again, right? The actual, not just the kind of the public stigma of failure, but like the bureaucratic and the financial and the legal side of writing your losses off, starting again, you know, it's easier, right? A bank is not going to look at you, okay, you had two businesses that were good, but then they failed, we're never going to give you a loan again. It's like you've written enough, you've done that procedure, you can go back again, and I think that this goes back to what you were saying about that we focus on the negatives, but like, you know, focusing on the negatives helps you grow as a business. And like we're in a nice restaurant, and I'm sure like anybody who's ever been in the restaurant business knows that like unless you're super lucky and you're really good at what you do, like usually your third or fourth restaurant will be the one that kind of takes off and it's successful because you've learned the first time around you did it like how you would want to do it, but maybe it's not for everybody, and then you know that fails. So I think we shouldn't be afraid of talking about failures. But we should be constructive in the fact that, you know, we should encourage people to learn from them and not to basically put people on a 20-year plan where they, you know, have to repay every single euro of a business loan that basically didn't convert into a successful business.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. My name is Siji Kendall from Law Challenges, so I'm a lawyer too. You know, thank you for this very interesting discussion, and I have just three brief remarks on what I've heard, or one remark, I'm not sure what I have not heard. The one on what I heard is about the taxes, and I think, you know, it's more a general issue. It's not just related to the sharing economy or Uber, because I mean the same question you asked would be how much taxes the traditional taxi driver has paid. And I'm pretty sure it'd be close to zero, or the same question can be put to the traditional taxi company. So it's more a general issue. And actually, when you take the Uber-like businesses, they provide an environment which can be easily handled from the taxi perspective, certainly more easy than the traditional businesses, such as the traditional taxi drivers. That was one remark. The second is what I have not heard, and that's Uber and similar businesses are multi-sided platforms, which is a big trend in economy. And we, at least my perception is that what we have heard was like from this one-sided perspective, why it is good for consumer, but for Uber to succeed, it was necessary to attract drivers, because that's the other side of the platform. And that relates to the issue of also the payments or the wages these drivers can earn. I mean, if Uber would not be attractive for the drivers, then it would not succeed. So if there is a problem with low wage of the drivers, I would not say this is a problem of Uber. And basically the issue of whether and how to regulate this is whether you believe in competition. I mean, if you believe in competition and Uber is competing also for the drivers, then there's not much need for regulation this side of the market, unless Uber has a market power in the attraction of the drivers, and I'm sure it does not. So that was the second. I mean, when we are looking at how to regulate, we shall not forget that this is a multi-sided platform. And the third issue was something which I think appeared repeatedly. That's the distinction between the genuine sharing and the evolution of business model, or how to say it. And I think that this is a crucial question, and this is something which has been stressed pretty much in every policy paper which has been issued on that, including the European Commission agenda for collaborative economy. And I think what is important, I think that from the state's perspective, it would be a fallacy to take this to the disadvantage of the shared economy platform, because it shall not be up to the platform to say what is genuine sharing and what is not. It shall be for the regulator. And if the regulator fails to say that, or say it in vague terms, it shall not be surprised that the platform tries to push the boundary line as far as it could. So that's it.
Maybe just to quickly add to that, of course we exist in a competitive environment. There's different apps that do what we do, right? And I think the crucial part here is that if we're talking about the service providers, the drivers or the couriers or whatever, they are free to get their passengers and their customers from as many different kind of sources as possible. I mean, we have no exclusivity, we have no fixed costs when working with our partners. So it's in markets where there's Uber and Taxify and I don't know, Wundercar or whatever other ride-sharing platforms there are. It's not a surprise to get in a car and to see a driver with 3 phones on his dashboard, because they whichever since he's not paying a membership fee in any of these platforms, as opposed to traditional taxi companies where you pay a monthly fee, then he's whichever one gives him a fare, that's what he's going to go with, and it's our business to make sure that there's most fares on our side, so that the earnings on our platform are the biggest. So this is how we compete for the driver, and the entry criteria are relatively simple, and so are the exit criteria. And same with, I don't know, if you're not happy with your email inbox provider, it's 10 clicks away, and you've got a different account with your same name, just a different domain. So I think this multi-apping is crucial, and I think we've seen contracts of traditional taxi providers with traditional companies in some markets that have explicitly forbidden their drivers to get fares from other sources. And I think that opening up, everybody wants to earn more, and so if we can open up the market for traditional taxi companies, for contractual transportation services, for the true ride sharing where you're driving from your home to work and you give to other people a fare, giving people these options will basically help a number of things, from the traffic to their earnings. And I think people would not be joining these platforms, and we wouldn't be seeing growth of us, Lyft, Careem, Yandex, a plethora of different companies, if there wasn't something here, right? This isn't just, people are not joining because they like the Uber logo. People are joining because they think that there's earnings, and their trips per hour and their earnings per hour will be higher here than they might be in a traditional market.
Thank you very much. Back to Michal's question. In the very long term, the only correlation you can find between economic performance and economic level is with one factor, which is economic freedom, nothing else. And sharing economy and Uber is always about voluntary contract between user and provider. And we liberal economists need only 2 frameworks for it: taxation and competition. Nothing more. Nothing more. Nothing more, with one exception, which is general legal framework and regulation. General. I'm convinced we don't need specific regulation for the new business model. You have an issue, definitely. You have an issue how to reconcile existing legal framework with the new models. But you can't reconcile it, because you can't reconcile existing legal and regulatory framework with general life, not to speak about new models. We have now the space only for last question, and then again I will open the table for the last reactions, and then Honza will try to wrap up the whole discussion. So please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ondřej Malý. I'm a co-founder of Liftego, which is the strongest Uber competitor here. So I wanted to tell you that Aleš, it doesn't work like that. Like everybody wants success stories, but take us. We're transporting more than 120,000 people each month in more cities than we're here. We are the best rated platform like this on Google Play and App Store in the whole Europe right now. We're still local, yeah, so we're just a Czech company. We're adhering to every single law, not because of us, but because of the drivers that use the platform. But still, we're not filling the front pages. So what the world needs is this conflict, and we're not creating one. And that's just the reality that I wanted to react. What the world needs, what the government needs is the data. And we're happy to share any data that you would like that doesn't disclose, or preserve the anonymity of the users. We already done so. We share the data with the government exactly to determine, which part of the platform is the professional one for us. Vast majority is the professional drivers. Even though they make money on different platforms or different dispatch companies, they're still professional. And we see the same with Uber, because we see them without any pink glasses. So it's really an easy thing to see. And the only thing I can ask Mateusz right now is the reason why you didn't share any kind of data that would help the government get to know your business. Because all we hear is great examples of how things work and how they will work perfectly from 2 years from now. And they will work perfectly 2 years from now when we have that access to API and the government to connect, and pass on payments and taxes and whatever. And they will work perfectly. It's just those 2 years that it will take, and the acts that you will do in between that put us away or make our business much more expensive than yours. So what I'm saying is there are success stories. They won't ever fill the papers. It's just the acts that we do, makes us slower. Even though the benefits for consumers are there, they're the same, maybe even better. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any reaction from? Okay, so let me now ask the panelists. They are ready or willing to bring any closing remarks, Aleši?
I think sharing economy is the future, definitely, but I really think that you are right, definitely. Free market is the future as well. We need, you said taxation and competition, definitely. For the taxation, I think you know what to do. The problem is the commission, not the drivers. Drivers are not Uber. Tax from the commission or so for you it's better to be in the Netherlands, not in Czech Republic. But definitely Silicon Valley is the future. Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you very much. Mateusz?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'd just like to repeat what I said earlier. Like we are at in first or second stage of discussing regulation in the Czech market. The Ministry of Infrastructure is pushing for amendments to the Road Transport Act, and I think this is an opportunity for us to work together to create new legislation that's fit for the day and age, right? I think, of course, data sharing is important, and I know you're working with this study, and so are we. We are actually going to be working. It's a little bit more difficult for us to share data than maybe for a smaller local company, just because we are global and we are not listed yet, and we are facing competitive pressure globally. So sharing data and pulling data and handing over data, not driver data, but like business metrics, is just a little bit more delicate, which is why maybe our data sharing is not as quick as you downloading some stuff into an Excel file and sending it over. On the other side, though, if we think about the ideal fit regulation, and we fully agree that there needs to be regulation, and that the current situation, as was mentioned, leads to different interpretations, and there's space for flexibility here. Like we definitely want clear rules, because they will give the partner drivers also the clarity. Like more and more times I take an Uber and they tell me, like, look, if there will be a simple license for me to perform this service that I'm performing, which is distinct from a taxi service, I will do it because that will give me the security that if I take a leasing on a new car, I'll still be able to do this job this time next year and still be able to pay my monthly lease payments, right? So I think we need to identify this. And on the other side, I hear a lot of in regulatory discussions in different countries, I hear a lot of arguments about how Uber should be regulated, what restrictions, what thresholds, etc. What I don't hear a lot of the time is how can we make life easier for the existing industry, right? Because leveling playing field, like if there is a certain group of entrepreneurs who have restrictions high and costs high, and they're making their life quite miserable. The solution is not to make everybody just as miserable, but it's to make everybody and at the same time there's a service that can be performed with less burdens because it's using technology, GPS, cashless payments. Then why don't we give the traditional providers the option to transform their business into a lower friction one, and then we can compete at a level playing field that's competitive, right? That's not artificially made burdensome just because we're trying to protect an inefficient business model that might have been efficient, in the 1990s, but perhaps now, times have changed, and we can help people compete better there.
Thank you. One small remark, actually, we are small, we'll see. We are a coordinator, therefore we have to listen to basically everybody and try to find a constructive solution to this. But I would like to maybe make an illustration of one aspect that is very important one to actually show you where the fears and where the issues come from, issues that we have to deal with at our platform, at our task force. We talked about competition and creating competition within a certain framework. And imagine now we have a lot of legal specialists here. Imagine that on the basis of an argument that you can have a mutually voluntary agreement between a client and a provider, some Bengali Czech legal specialist would actually provide through the internet legal advice, a specific certificate for something to me as in a need of a legal, let's say, paper of something. Well, it is unlikely because there's a barrier of language first, but this is something that is not in principle an issue. And with the new platforms and maybe more specialization globally, that could be actually quite feasible that there is somebody, a legal specialist in Bangladesh or in India or anywhere else in the world, in Slovakia, that is providing through the internet those services actually to check customers. But of course, today it is impossible because what is shielding you is not just the language, but it's also the stamp and your exam, your legal, let's say, curriculum. And opening this completely would create maybe some external costs, maybe not, maybe it's good for the competition. But imagine that this is happening to the drivers and that they talk to us in this way and they have some fears. I'm not saying this is good or bad, actually I would see a lot of, and I do see a lot of good things in competition, but still we are a coordinator and we're listening to those interests that actually have to face an open competition on a completely unchallenged or unforeseen scale. And of course, there are worries, and we are there actually to basically grasp the positive part of competition and somehow make it work. And changing the current regulatory framework in a way that would not endanger all the parties in the economy is something that we have to do with Uber, but with basically everything else. But just try to put yourself in our minds as a coordinator, having all these interests actually in our task force, and trying to find a constructive solution. It is really not easy. And I think this example with legal services is an important one to really realize how the people think, not how it is. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a valid argument, but just how the business people and the providers actually do feel in the sector, as an illustration. But we really have to work on decreasing also the regulatory framework altogether actually in many areas. This is a great opportunity actually to platforms to do this. That is something that has to be said, and basically everybody understands that. Thanks.
Aleši, thank you very much. Now, Honzo, you have a difficult task to try to wrap up the whole discussion, which is not easy.
Thank you. Just one little remark to what just guys said. I would like to come back to what Pavel mentioned in the beginning, that in a couple of years we will have probably a lot of this self-driving and autonomous cars going around, and it's pretty expensive technology. And there's one thing that Mateusz and some mentioned, that they are backed by multi-billion dollars VC funds, and I'm afraid that local guys like Ondřej cannot afford to lose $2.8 billion and $1 billion more in China just for the last year. So I just want to mention that the competition itself is not between just the guys, just the companies here, but also between the big capital. And the one thing we can do, well, is not just to regulate someone. And one thing, and I think Aleš would agree, is to provide enough capital for the local guys to compete, to survive even in the new technology market and so on. Well, to wrap it up, well, it's not easy. I can just go through the points we all mentioned. I think it's quite clear that we talk about the legal framework and regulation. Unfortunately for me, just about the regulation, but there's a lot more to talk about in the sharing economy area. I'm really glad that Michal mentioned the macroeconomic aspects, and I think we can just agree with Pavel that well, it's the better utilization of resources is always positive for our economy, and that the enlarging of the market is a great thing. Of course, we talk about the competition and the platforms itself, and I think we will hear about it more in the future. Yes, we want your money from the taxes, and we really want your data, and we should think about the drivers, about the small guys, about the guys working sometimes, unfortunately, and I'm sure you're working on that 15 hours a day, and it's quite terrible, and well, I think you will sort it out, but we should also talk to guys like your competitors. Well, and I think one of the most important remarks was that we need the success stories, and yes, we need the local companies building our sharing economy, not just the foreign guys, not just platforms like Uber, Airbnb, and others. We need our own companies, and that comes back to the capital and to the smart money. And I'm really sure that even in this room are guys willing and happy to provide it. So go on.
Also, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of our discussion. Let me thank the Institute for Politics and Society, ELF, and LI, organizing the Week of Innovations. Then I would like to thank very much to all the panelists, Mateusz Litewski, Ondřej Malý, who left us, Aleš Melář, Aleš Michal, Jan Klesla, and first of all, let me thank you very much that you joined the discussion. Enjoy the day and enjoy your next ride sharing.